Welcome to And That's the Game podcast. Presented by Pro Batter Sports. And That's the Game is hosted by Wayne Mazzoni. Today's special guest is Chris Holt.
Hello and welcome to this episode of And That's the Game podcast presented by Pro Batter Sports. I'm your host, Wayne Mazzoni. My background is 30 years as a college baseball coach and current college baseball recruiting advisor. For more information on that, you can visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. Today's guest was Chris Holt. Chris Holt, his current position is the bullpen coach for the Boston Red Sox. But boy, we covered a lot of his background leading up to that because this is his first year of that. Chris is from Maine. Started his college career at St. Joe's, then eventually went to Flagler College, spent a couple of years in the minor leagues with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and then really has an extensive coaching background. Did his first few years at Flagler, then transitioned to several years as a high school coach, and then through basically pitching, educational programs, really developed as a coach and started networking with coaches to the point where he was eventually hired by the Houston Astros, working various positions in the minor leagues, then moved over to the Baltimore Orioles, eventually was named the director of pitching development, and also spent 3 years as the major league pitching coach for Baltimore Orioles. In his last season, he was back to just the director of pitching development for the whole organization, and then now starts his job as the bullpen coach with the Boston Red Sox. So it was a really thorough background on coaching and pitching at the levels that he's been at. I'd like to remind you that this podcast is made possible through the great support of Pro Batter Sports, maker of the most advanced pitching machines for baseball, softball, and cricket. Like a pilot training in a flight simulator, hitters can practice like they play, getting the equivalent of live at-bats against a batting practice pitcher who never gets tired and can throw any pitch with pinpoint accuracy. Check out their line of amazingly affordable systems at probatter.com and take your swing to the next level. In addition, don't miss the new book, Practice Like You Play, authored by Adam Battersby, the president of Pro Batter Sports, with a chapter written by yours truly, available today on Amazon.com. All right, Chris, first of all, awesome to be with you. And I really sincerely appreciate getting your time because I know in the off season, it's got to be precious because once you get rolling, like you're locked in for quite a while. So I really do appreciate you being here. And, you and I know each other. We met obviously at Mohegan Sun last year. We did a cool panel together on pitching. And then we just texted back and forth, mostly about beards, of which then you shaved yours, but we'll get back to it. And then before we started recording, I asked, where you are now. You're in Maine. So let's start at that point. Were you born and raised in Maine?
Yep, Portland, Maine, born and raised. Played Little League here. Played my first college baseball just up the road at St. Joseph's College and then near Sebago Lake. And then moved back here in 2014 after living in Florida for about 14, 15 years. And then when I signed on to coach in pro ball, we moved back up here where family is.
So I love Maine. I'm a New England guy. I love it. I've been to Acadia a bunch. I have not really been to Portland a lot. Is it like all my friends are like, you got to go restaurants, to food? Is it legit like that? Is it that?
It is. Yeah, it's as advertised. I think we have our spots that we go to, but you can literally try a new restaurant every night of the week if you wanted to. And I know we've gotten some national acclaim from Bon Appetit or whatever. I think there's more. We're in the top 5 restaurants per square mile, and we're up there with cities like Chicago, New York, New Orleans, like bigger cities.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it almost seems like like if I could get my wife and a couple of other couples and like go for a long weekend and just basically eat the whole time would be pretty fun.
Yeah, you could easily do that. I think the other good thing too is, you got ocean, you've got mountains, you've got lakes. There's a lot you can do. So it's especially in the summertime, fall time, I don't think there's a better place to live than here. But wintertime, it's cold, as advertised, plenty of snow, and it just goes with the territory.
In terms of your upbringing sports-wise, obviously baseball was a part of it. were you playing a bunch of sports? I mean, is hockey there? Like, what? Tell me about your, just high school from a sports perspective.
Yeah, to be honest, it was pretty much just baseball as far as organized sports.
Right.
I played a lot of street hockey when I learned how to rollerblade. There was like rollerblade, street hockey, but was a pretty big hockey fan as a kid growing up. My father used to take me to the Maine Mariners games. They were the 3A club for the Bruins at the time. So really loved hockey. Very expensive early mornings. Just didn't work out for me to be able to compete with it. But, and then middle school hit, I started running track. Tried to play football my 8th grade year and hurt my back, and the coach told me to get ready for baseball season. So it was always baseball. And then as I got into middle school and high school, like I started doing other things to try to get more athletic and round out the off season and be more active.
So looking up your bio, you're basically looks like you're 10 years younger than me, which means from a recruiting perspective, like I would imagine recruiting was not just that. Nothing was going on really recruiting wise in terms of most kids, but especially in Maine. So like, I'm assuming colleges weren't pouring all over you like in high school. And if you did play travel, like, tell me about that part. Obviously got to St. Joe's. Was it because it was local? How did that whole piece come about?
Yeah, so I'd gone to University of Maine Black Bears camp up in Orono for like every year from the time I was 9 until the last year I could go when I was 18. And John Winkin, who was the head coach there for a long time,
famous,
was interested in recruiting me as a two-way kind of an outfielder and pitcher. And then by the time I was graduating high school, I think his final year there was probably my sophomore or junior year. So I was no longer on the radar for UMaine. I had kind of a down junior year. I kind of felt like my velocity as a pitcher kind of got worse throughout my high school career, which is an interesting topic in and of itself we can revisit. But by the time I was a junior or senior in high school, I really didn't have much interest from colleges for baseball other than Coach Will Sanborn at St. Joseph's. He extended an offer to me. I elected to go to University of Denver out of high school. I was there for a semester and went, I got to play ball. So I transferred back, was playing ball in the spring of 99, and then was there for one more season in 2000. So yeah, not a huge recruiting situation as far as me and as a player, but made it work. And I just kept, I guess, staying after what I wanted to do, which was, throw as hard as I could and be as good as I could get. And, there's more to unpack there when we get there. But
for sure,
it's definitely a story that, I was not a top front of the line recruit at all.
So obviously I didn't know about Denver. And if you had stayed at Denver, your life would have probably taken a whole different path than going back to St. Joe's playing. And then obviously I know you went on to Flagler. So tell me about that move. How did Flagler come about from St. Joe's?
Yeah, it's interesting. So as a freshman at St. Joseph's, we didn't really keep a radar gun. I think if it was kept, it was kind of peripheral. I could pitch, I could locate, I could change speeds. I threw a no-hitter as a freshman against another D5 team from up at Central Maine. And so, I could pitch. And then it was the summer after my freshman year, my high school pitching coach, a guy named Kevin Smith, who had played at Miami, won a national championship with Miami. I think it was 82 or 83. I don't know. It was the year they did the hidden ball trick at first base. Yeah. He was on that team. He ended up transferring to Florida State and pitching for a guy named Mike McLeod, who was the pitching coach. Well, Coach McLeod was then the head coach at Tallahassee Community College. Kevin Smith took me down to Tallahassee the summer after my freshman year. And I threw a bullpen with Mac, and I think Mac got me from 80, 82 to like 85, 87 in 20 minutes.
Goodness gracious.
And I was like hooked. And then, it was one of those deals where like I wasn't going to vie for any scholarship money. It was a tough kind of sell for me to leave a 4-year school. I just didn't know anything about JUCO. So I didn't go there. But the following summer, I went back down to work out with him and his pitching guy again. And they go, "Are you still trying to get down here? Do you want to pitch in warm weather?" I went, "Yeah, what do you got?" And so he called Link Jarrett, who is now at FSU, but Link was assistant coach at Flagler at the time. And he, instead of, I was working a camp for Mac, so he rented me a car in lieu of pay for the camp, got me a hotel over there. And he said, "Look, man, there's an open Braves tryout on Saturday morning at Flagler. Go throw for Link over there." Long story short, I was, 87, 89 in that open workout, which might have been the first time I was ever 87, 89 in my life.
Right.
And Link signed me on the spot for scholarship money. And I just was, I was ecstatic. I couldn't say no. And I went back and told Coach Sanborn, "Thank you for everything, but I want to go where it's warm and see what I can do with this thing, And so I, transferred to Flagler in the fall, and 2 years later got drafted by the Pirates. And, I was probably, an 86 to 90 guy on average. There were some days out of the pen where I might have been a tick above that, just, on adrenaline and caffeine, but I was never a hard thrower. I was going to pitch, So yeah, that's the skinny on it.
Do you happen to remember in that bullpen where he in 20 minutes got your velo up? Was it a mechanical adjustment? Was it a mental approach? Do you have any recollection of what ticked to get that out of you?
It's extremely clear and vivid, that memory. So the first thing he wanted me to do was he wanted me to get my arm, basically what we know now to be, what Driveline would term as like an on-time pickup phase, also recruiting a little more stap retraction and having a little more elbow-driven arm path to recruit the things that are available. I was just very hand dominant. My delivery coming in was like old school. Like I had almost like a Sutcliffe kind of stab, and it was a very stale mechanical delivery. That he got me moving and got me athletic. And then he goes, "You got a great Mac." He had a way with words. He goes, you got a great ass and legs on you, so we got to get that ass and legs alive." And I'm like, "Let's do it." So he basically taught me how to get a little bit of a sit going. And, between getting a sit and some momentum and putting some more force in the ground, probably at this point, and getting my arm path hooked up on time. It was 20 minutes in 5 to 7 miles an hour. It was in there. Just he got it out in 20 minutes.
Seems like almost like sequential, getting you on time and creating some whip in that arm is what it sounds like.
100%. Yeah.
Very cool. So my first year coaching, 1992, I was a grad student at St. Thomas University, and I was a GA at Nova Southeastern, and we used to play all those teams. I remember going up to Flagler. That's in a ridiculously cool area, is it not?
Yeah, St. Augustine is, it's unlike any other town in Florida. It's got a lot of history. There's like a European feel to the downtown area. There's like a local culture to kind of the people that settled there. So it's definitely got a different feel than any other place I've been to in Florida. And the school itself, the downtown area, it kind of sells itself. It's historic looking, but it's gorgeous. And, the nights of lights in November, December, January, it's just like a great feel kind of place to live. And, perhaps if we'd have never left there, we might still be there because we did like it a lot and had roots there. But, as we'll get to, we decided to make a journey across the state and then move back up to Maine after having lived in Clearwater for a couple of years.
You said obviously it was Link he was the assistant then at that point?
Yes.
Who was the head coach then?
That is Coach Dave Barnett.
Dave Barnett, who was there forever. Is that correct?
Just retired after last year. And I think you could probably bring up Dave's name with anybody at the ABCA convention, and he knows them and they know who he is at the very least. He is He's brought up names with me that I'm like, he just knows everybody and anybody that's in the mix, and very thankful for him giving me the opportunity to play there. And then, a couple of years down the road, I would end up coaching with him there too, and he gave me my start as a coach. So without, again, it's like we all have those people in our lives and our careers that, like, if you hadn't have had those people, you just wouldn't have had the building blocks or the stair steps to go where you wanted to go next and build. So, Kevin Smith was definitely that for me. Another local coach named Mike DeAndrea here, and Coach Barnett, giving me that opportunity, and obviously the chance to coach as well, which was where I wanted to go next after being done playing.
Do you recall? I assume by the time you actually played at Flagler, was Link still there?
No, Link left. My senior year was his last year. I think he went to Mercer from there. So I think he became the head coach at Mercer before going to UNC somewhere. And then it was on to Notre Dame, where he went to the tournament with a team that wasn't projected to make it out of their conference. And
right.
Then he's on to FSU and doing good things there.
Had you stayed in touch with him? Because I know last year's convention he was there. Did you connect with him there too?
So he was at the convention the year before. And
okay.
Funny story, because like I had a copy of the itinerary of the speaker list sent to me, and it was actually included the previous year, so his name was on there. I called Link the morning of the conference starting up. I said, "Are you here?" And he said, "No, I spoke at it last year, but give me a call after." So we reconnected through the Mohegan Sun conference, and had a couple of really nice chats. And he's got a really solid program going down there now. And I think that if there's anybody who can keep FSU, the FSU program that we've known it to be, it's going to be Link. I mean, he was a 4-year walk-on. He got cut at Flagler coming in for like a recruitment camp. There was no place for him at an NAIA school. He goes to FSU and walks on, and I don't think he ever looked back.
Yeah, I mean, you could just tell I don't know him well at all, other than that convention. The guy's got a high motor. You could see that. I mean, great baseball guy, but high motor. Let's get back to, obviously, with, you're at Flagler now. Was it basically right away you were doing well enough to start getting scouted and have people look at you? Was it, pretty early on there?
Yeah. So as a junior transfer, in fall ball, I was coming off of a little bit of an injury to my forearm. We never really knew what it was. It kind of felt like shin splints, in the bones of my forearm. And, it was like almost like a knife stabbing pain, like all fall. And then I kind of pitched through it in the spring, was mostly out of the bullpen in the spring. I may have started a couple of Saturday doubleheader games, but again, it was primarily like out of the gate, just working to maintain velocity and a power breaking ball, and really just kind of go let it rip and do my best for my team. And then, so no, I was not really on the radar coming out of the blocks at Flagler. Between my junior and senior seasons, I actually went up to South Carolina with a handful of my Flagler teammates and played in a small collegiate league up there. At the time, it was called the Southern Collegiate Baseball League. And we were up in Anderson, South Carolina, a couple miles east of Clemson. And I mean, at the end of my junior season, I was overweight. I didn't pitch much towards the back end of the season. Maybe fell out of favor, didn't perform. I forget exactly what it was, but I went into that summer going, I'm just gonna hit this thing the way I know how, and was running 2 miles twice a day and eating right. And by the time I got back to fall ball, I was like 185. I was in shape. I had a chance to work with Kevin O'Sullivan, who was then the pitching coach at Clemson. And I worked 3 straight weeks out of 4 total that they run for kids camps there, and got a chance to work with Sully. yeah, I don't know if you remember the name Khalil Green.
Yes, of course.
So like he would jump in and catch bullpens. I was throwing bullpens to Khalil Green and long tossing with some of their players. And so it was a really good experience. Sully worked with me on some delivery things. And I came back in the fall, like being able to locate, being able to maintain velo, but then also being able to locate my off speed. And so once I was able to maintain velo and, really pitch consistently well with a plus curveball, and of course, adding a cutter or a slider in here or there, occasional two seam or a changeup. But, Sully's work with me, I think, from a timing perspective and a pitchability perspective, helped me to maintain the things that Mac had me do with velo. But then, what Sully worked with me allowed me to pitch with a plan. And when you can attack with a plan, it's a game changer.
And obviously, somehow or another, that forearm issue dissipated at some point, correct?
Yeah, I think at some point it just kind of went away. It's tough to remember. It was always in the back of my mind because it was like a year and a half I battled that thing.
Wow.
And but pitched all the way through my senior year. Didn't miss a start or an outing. I pitched midweek in between starts on bullpen day. And you said, what year were you at St. Thomas?
1992.
92.
Yeah.
Yep, I pitched in midweek down there, and my final start of my college career was against St. Thomas at the stadium in Winter Haven, which I think was then still the Indians.
Right.
And through a complete game, 155 pitches against the St. Thomas team, and was like ready to go the next day because it's a tournament, all hands on
right.
deck.
Yep.
So really solid memory there. But it was, looking back on it, it was an opportunity that I got at Flagler that I just between the environment and the urgency to win and compete in that conference. I mean, I know, look, NAIA ball is not Division I college baseball. It's not the SEC, but there are some extremely talented teams and talent pools, even back in 2001, 2002. I mean, Friday night guys throwing 94 to 96. And I just think the depth was probably not as deep as Division I. And a lot of the bats that you'd see in the lineup were guys that, didn't stay in D1 or, came from power JUCOs, or they just had a good opportunity. So there was some really good baseball being played. And, being able to have that opportunity and then playing at that level and having to improve my capabilities to win, I think, pushed me. And I got scouted one night pitching midweek against Rollins. And, the Pirates took a look at me. I filled out a card, and then draft day, it was like the Angels and the Pirates were in on me. So that's how that all worked out. And then, that draft, I think, was still 42 rounds. I got taken in the 21st round in the 2002 draft.
So back to your point, I mean, I there's not a college level team in Florida playing. I don't care what the title is. It's legit baseball, man. It's legit baseball, flat out. That's for sure. Obviously, I ask questions like this on this podcast a lot, which is kind of a goofy in a way, but can you recap or encapsulate your minor league career? Like the ups, the downs, what can you say? What do you remember now at this point about that time in pro ball?
I was not a very good pro pitcher. I got drafted old. I was 24 when I got drafted. I was a senior sign. I went to the Penn League up in Williamsport. Current athletics pitching coach Scott Emerson was my pitching coach in 2002. And look, between, throwing 100+ innings as a senior and, not really knowing how to ramp it back up. I mean, I want to say I was probably mid-80s all summer, trying to learn a few things with delivery. But I kind of read the writing on the wall early. I mean, I'm warming up with breaking balls, and I got Henry Owens and Roberto Novoa popping 99 next to me. I got it, So I figured I'm just going to try to stay and do what I do well until they tell me not to. And got hung on until like extended spring the following year, but then got released out of extended spring. And, very fortunate and grateful to have had that opportunity and get to live a little bit of pro ball life and have that, door be open at some point for if I ever got the opportunity to coach in pro ball, which I did. And I think some of that can help,
Yeah, I mean, it's people always, I don't think it's maybe people like you and I in the know, if you will, but it's got to be well under 10%, maybe 8% of minor leaguers that ever just get to the big leagues. I mean,
yeah,
the majority of people that are having that experience are not, going on. So like, that's a good approach. You realizing, hold on, I'm not as good as these dudes. Let me just enjoy this time, as opposed to being surprised or miserable after that part of your life was done. You kind of could see that it was coming.
Yeah, if I had dropped down and become a side armor, maybe I make it to double A. It's all relative. If you make it to A ball, you wanted to make it to double A. If you fizzled at dubs, you wanted to get to the big leagues. And if you get to the big leagues and you didn't win a World Series, it's all relative, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, when it's all said and done, I was just very grateful for my time. And then, not to cast shade on anything in particular, but I also kind of learned some things that, down the road, coaching wise, like I'm like, I don't like this. I don't know that I want to teach this, or I wouldn't take players in this direction, having kind of worked through some things. It was more so like an extended spring the following year. And, it was all the typical things that, maybe were institutionalized methodologies back in the day. It was, stay tall, break over the rubber, throw downhill. A lot of the things that have since come to pass as far as reliable teaches.
Right.
And so as a coach at Flagler my first year, some of those things leaked their way into what I was teaching. And I saw the same kind of pitfalls that I experienced at times as a player. And after my first year coaching, I kind of took a look at that and went, I don't want to do that again. That's not working, and it didn't work for me. I don't know why I did it, but it's, it was an organized plan, and it was something that I had recent experience with. So it's probably where my mind went at the time as far as any kind of coaching platform. Moving forward, it was then on to, doing a Tom House clinic out in Miramar and getting introduced to the guys at the Texas Baseball Ranch, Brent Strom and Wolfworth, and who's my cat who's with the Rockies now. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't actually.
I'll come back up with his name in a minute. But anyway, it was a whole new world as far as like from a coaching standpoint, coming from kind of institutionalized traditional mechanical things to looking at what athletic deliveries are actually doing, and looking at old timers like Bob Gibson, Walter Johnson, Nolan Ryan through the ages is a very interesting case study. Clemens early on, it's like, we started looking at, what really goes into this and how are guys actually moving to produce elite stuff to elite locations and have maxed out repertoire. So, we as from a coaching perspective, I was glad to be part of an early group that we were working for something more than what was out there available.
Yeah, I mean, you hit home with something with me. I mean, no offense to my well-meaning coaches, I don't think I was really coached great. And then when I started coaching, I think I screwed up a lot of kids. Like I was just teaching what had been taught. It was really only when video became more available and you can actually almost teach yourself by look, what are these guys doing? Not that they're all doing the same thing, but when you have this theory and then you actually watch it and go, hold on, all these guys are doing something different. Yeah, I like that evolution. Did you know in college or in the minors that, hey, when I'm done, like coaching's my route? Or did Flagler come because you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do? Like, how did that first transition to coaching at Flagler happen?
And looking back, it's funny because I maybe didn't know it at the time, but like working camps at St. Joe's maybe even where I think we ran summer camps where I went to high school at Cheverus here in Portland. And I remember really enjoying, working with other players. Of course, we had like middle school, high school kids coming to the college camp at St. Joe's. We worked camps at Flagler. And so I always enjoyed that and always took it very seriously. Because I remember being a kid at those camps and like the guys that did those camps, whether it was like something that Deering High School was running here, like the guys that came in and coached were like, they were about it. And,
Right.
I just kind of maybe by default brought that same energy. I think there were some other players there coaching, babysitting, whatever. I was like, working to get after it. So when it came time for me to be done playing, I always had a very strong interest in, how things worked and working to get better. My experience with Kevin Smith and Mike McLeod, that kind of lit a fire maybe early, planted some seeds early that, I really had an interest in working to help develop guys. And, the passion for the game and pitching in particular, I think it was a natural fit. And after I got released from the Pirates in 2003, I went to Europe for a year and, started doing a little bit of hands-on coaching there. I mean, I was, playing for a team there, but also responsible for a second division team where, we get 4 to 5 guys showing up to practice on a Tuesday. And
where were you?
I was in Austria and I lived about halfway between Salzburg and a town called Linz. So it was like Upper Austria, a 45-minute train ride to Salzburg and half-hour train ride to where I coached. So great experience. Started getting my feet wet there as far as coaching and working with guys in a small way. And, I guess that fast forwards us to all of a sudden was on a 5 or a 6 week hiatus during the middle of the season in the Austrian league. Every year that league shuts down for 4 to 6 weeks because the Austrian national team pulls players from every team in the league. So I just went on vacation. I went up to Germany to hang out with a friend of mine who was coaching up there. And he and I were in downtown Cologne doing a brewery tour. And the night had been going on for quite some time. And out of nowhere, his cell phone rings. My cell phone was dead. My team gave me a cell phone, but it was out of power, it's the whole thing. So nobody get in touch with me. His cell phone rings and he answers and says, yeah, oh, yeah, he's here. He's right here. Yeah. Hands the phone to me. I'm like, how does anybody even have your number, know where I am, whatever? Well, guess who it is? It's Dave Barnett from Flagler College. And he says to me, hey, Coach Holt, I'm calling to ask to see if you want to be the pitching coach at Flagler College. And I went, yes, I do. How did you get this number? He's like, don't worry about it. He still to this day has not told me how he got a hold of me. I think the stars aligned and I'm just willing to let it go. But it's an interesting story there. And from there on, flew back to Florida and started my coaching career in 2000. It was fall of 2004, spring of 2005. Dan Fitzgerald, now the head coach at Kansas, was the head assistant and recruiting coordinator. He's another one who, without him, you just go, I don't know if there's the things being around him and things that I learned from being around him. You just don't know if it would have gone the same way,
Interestingly enough, in April, I went to Europe. I'm a massive Dave Matthews Band fan, and I went to Europe and saw a show in Amsterdam, and then the second show was in Cologne. So it's funny, like you don't really hear people that have been to that. They got that crazy church, that cathedral there, which is really neat.
Yeah, that's a spectacle. That Gothic cathedral it's world renowned and
world renowned. I do know that after Flagler, did you go to coach high school for a little bit?
Yeah, so after Flagler, so my wife and I, we had our first child in spring of It would have been '06, '07. So it's, January of '07, my final year coaching at Flagler. It was just kind of time to where I couldn't continue to work for a stipend at a
Yes.
NAI.
We all get there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a really good experience. My 3 years working for Coach Barnett. Between the time that I left Flagler and started coaching high school, I actually was doing kind of volunteer assistant work in the fall of '07 at St. John's River with a coach named Mike Robbins, and was driving back and forth to Palatka, Florida, 45 minutes each way just to work with guys for free and be part of it. Got a call midwinter of that year, and Travis Chapman, who was the head coach at Nice High School, reached out to me to ask me if I'd be willing to coach the freshman team at Nice High School. And I said, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. So 2008, I was the head coach for a freshman team. Travis Chapman is now the first base coach for the Yankees. So he and I actually have, coached across the field from each other at the high school and major league levels, which is interesting.
Very.
And so I started coaching there, hired an assistant who had been a position player at Flagler, a guy named Chris King, who is still a high school coach in Northeast Florida right now. Really enjoyed my time working with him. That summer, decided to run a travel team because we had a handful of the kids that were on that freshman team that had no summer team to play for. So I just filled the gap, and the 2008 travel team was called the Rough Riders, Ponte Vedra Rough Riders. And that was a name voted on by the team. And then the following year, Ponte Vedra High School opened up. Coach Tom Stanton, who had been at Episcopal High School in Jacksonville, got hired as the head coach, and he reached out to me. We met up, talked a little shop, realized it was a good fit personally and, belief systems wise. And that fall, we got a brand new school, brand new program off the ground and running. And it was '09, '10, and '11 that I was there. And our second year of the program went to the state semifinals with a homegrown group. So Tom Stanton had, he had pro ball experience. He caught up to AA with the Mets and Dodgers. We had a strength coach who had been a strength coach for both the Dodgers and the Marlins. So and then myself, who had professional experience as well. And then coincidentally, we had a hitting coach who had played for Mike McLeod at Tallahassee Community College. And then a guy named Charles Serrato, who had gone to Nova. I'm not sure if you remember that name, but we had a really solid staff. We got after it, and we expected a lot. Had a huge sense of urgency, and it was a really great experience coaching at that level with that group. And I think that from a coaching, 10,000 hours, man cave perspective, I spent those 3 years were very formative and gave me the opportunity to really dive in and not try things, but eliminate certain things and really find ways to create a program that was user friendly within the framework of the high school schedule, both fall and summer and the school year and the off season, but also, being, growth mindset in a way where a kid like Walker Scheller, who comes in as a freshman and he's 5'2", but I see mom and dad's 6'4", 6'5". Mom's like 6 foot, and I'm like, Walk, we're gonna eventually get you to 95, but right now we got to learn a few tricks so we can stick around. And so he learned how to drop down because he was 5 foot nothing, and
right.
Fast forward to his junior year, he's 92, and then he ends up going to Lake Sumter Community College, and he's 93, 94, ends up becoming a closer at Stetson, and then ends up getting drafted by the Royals, and he's a 93-5 guy, maybe grabbing 6, So
right.
being able to work with a group over a course of years and, see a number of guys go on to college, Division I baseball and do things, trying to pay it forward. I had, good coaches in high school and recognized the passion and the desire for some of those players to continue to do that at a higher level, and, wanted to challenge them and give them a program that would play and work to develop in addition to like winning games in a high school season.
All right, that's a perfect time to take a little break with Chris Holt. We'll be right back after these words.
Introducing ProBatter, the future of baseball training. With the PX3, you can practice like you play. There is a better way to train your athletes. With an easy-to-use touchscreen controller, you can program any pitch, any speed, at any location. The ProBatter simulator is designed to replicate real game, real-world pitching. Better practice, better play. Hit any spot inside or outside the strike zone. The PX3 features reliable mechanics and an optional automatic ball feeder system. Get the most from practice. In addition to baseball, the PX3 is perfect for softball. With the PX3, no more relying on practice pitchers or basic pitching machines. Better practice, better play. ProBatter. Train like it's game day. Step up to the plate with confidence.
Hello, this is Wayne Mazzoni, host of And That's the Game podcast. I hope you're enjoying listening and watching the podcast as much as I am making it. It's really been enjoyable to connect with all these great people, great baseball people. The purpose of this message is to let you know about College Baseball Advisors, a company that I founded a couple years back after 30 years as a college baseball coach. I basically guide players and families through the recruiting process. If you're interested in learning more, please go to collegebaseballadvisor.com and learn more, or book a call where we basically will meet and talk about your recruiting process. I'll lay out a 3-step plan for you to move forward. If after that call you think I'm someone that could help you in this process, we can discuss that. If not, you just want to take that information and use it to go forward, that's great as well. So hope to see you down the road. Thank you. All right, so we're back with Chris Holt. That was awesome what you just talked about with the high school experience, and maybe this will come up after. Like, I've always felt personally, not the best coaches, but like you make the most impact at that like high school age, because these kids you're shaping them at that point, where obviously we're talking about you working with pro guys and maybe just a different type of coaching experience. But let's talk about that. So you said Ponte Vedra, is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, Ponte Vedra.
Ponte Vedra, yeah. I try to put some Italian spin on it.
It's TPC Sawgrass. It's the 17th Island Green is the famous. That's the famous landmark in that town.
So from there, the next move now is into pro ball, which I want to talk about. But how did that transition from, obviously your background is really strong, but how did you go from that high school job to getting into working in the pro ball level?
Yeah, interesting. So I met Brent Strom. I took a group of 3 or 4 high school pitchers to a pitchers boot camp in Houston. And that was Brent Strom, Ron Wolforth. And it was a 3-day boot camp where they go in and do all the dynamic warm-ups and all the training stuff and velo development work. And so got to know Brent Strom in person there, had spoken on the phone with him
He's incredible. I've met him a couple times. He's unbelievable.
Oh, it's
unbelievable.
Again, another guy. Without him, it doesn't happen.
Right?
It's simple as that. And I've told him that, and he doesn't ever accept that, but it's true. So I took a group out there and got to know him, and he and I started talking about Dr. Mike Marshall's old methodologies, because at the time, I had 2 guys that went down with TJ spring of 06 and 07, and they both exhibited like similar kind of arm path, movement profiles, if you want to call it that. Just, very, very late at foot strike, kind of what we now know to be like that hook behind a chromial line. And the late forearm turn. I started really looking into, okay, why are guys getting hurt? What causes injury. I don't know that anyone has ever really been able to zero in on it scientifically to the point where they're going to alleviate injuries from the game entirely. However, there are certain things that, through studying Marshall's, like his entire book on injurious mechanical flaws, the training methodologies with the wrist weights and the iron balls. He later went on to use other implements as well. But, the principles behind what he was teaching, especially early on. I mean, Rudy Cianez was a 100-mile-an-hour guy who went to him, was 100 out of the windup, but when he got to the stretch, this was from a meeting I had with Marshall later when I was coaching, but basically Rudy needed to figure out how to throw hard from the stretch. And so he started doing the wrist weights and the iron ball throws. And if you look at Cianez's delivery, it's very representative of, what Marshall was teaching very early on. And I actually had a chance to work with a guy named Mike Burns, who pitched in the big leagues for Astros, Red Sox, Brewers. And his dad had sent him to Mike Marshall's house/training facility in Zephyr Hills, Florida, for a college off season to train him how to pitch. He wanted to pitch, and so he sent him there. So I had a chance to work with a guy who directly trained under Marshall, and a lot of the same things that come up in those discussions, Brent Strom and I were trying to figure out how to, understand these principles, but also, work these training principles into the traditional delivery, because flat out, I mean, the Marshall delivery, as injury proof as it might be, just simply did not produce velocity that you'd come to expect from professional pitchers. And so all it really takes is knowing that, you've got to really be able to work within, what it is that pro ball accepts, and also be able to implement some of the principles into the timing of deliveries, the recruitment in deliveries, and knowing too that in all likelihood, you're not going to be able to train with iron balls and 25 and 30-pound wrist weights. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But the movements, the exercises, and the things that he and I learned from studying Marshall, they still hold up in a lot of ways from a timing perspective, a force application perspective, and it's still a very big piece of the lenses that I look through when I look at pitchers. So that's a long-winded way of kind of getting at, Strami and I really had this vested interest in trying to really work through this. So I put myself through a full Mike Marshall iron ball wrist weight training program, up to 12, 15-pound balls, 30-pound wrist weights. I mean, and I could, as advertised from the program, I could throw 250 throws max effort a day. I could throw BP all 4 rounds, and just go, because it taught me how to use my arm and apply force without having the pain of soft tissue come from the things that I just, inherently kind of did growing up. So that training program stuck with me. And then I presented at Ron Wolforth's coaches boot camp the following winter. And so I had, in the meantime, had an opportunity to go work as the pitching coach at this facility that was down in Clearwater. That it was very short-lived. I mean, I think financially they couldn't make it work. So I stuck around and was working there at the same facility at the old Jack Russell Stadium in Clearwater. And that was the winning inning, and that was run by Randy Holland and Roy Silver, a couple of guys that had been in pro ball as trainers and coaches who were running the winning inning as a baseball training, and it was a very Christian-based program, very community outreach oriented, was really more about baseball plus, hearts and minds. And it was a very formative time for me to, be around guys like Roy and Randy, who had, done the baseball thing, but brought in the, maybe the heart, if you want, to the coaching aspect and the baseball aspect. So very valuable time there for me. And it was out of there where, I'd met Doug White along with Brent Strom. We all spoke at that pitching coaches boot camp. And I'd had a dialogue with Doug White for about a year. And when he got the coordinator job in Houston, he hired me to come in and, coach A-ball and be, on the farm at the complex, like getting the program up and running, and, asked me to contribute to the program and throwing programs, delivery, pitch development, all the things that we now know to be like commonplace. We were doing some things in Houston very early that was probably the road less traveled in pro ball.
Right. So very cool. I mean, so you delved it. Basically, it seems like a passion that you love doing and were so into. And then by just learning yourself and this growth mindset and meeting these people, it just kept moving things forward. So Houston was that first job at the pro ball level. How long did you stay with Houston?
I was with Houston for a total of 5 years. My first 2 years, I was in extended spring in the New York Penn League, short season. 2016 went full season at Quad Cities, and then 2017 was in the Carolina League at a temporary site while they were building a new stadium in Fayetteville, and then was the assistant coordinator in 2018.
In that role with Houston and what you just reviewed, were you a pitching coach for a specific team or working with all different pitchers, in the organization?
Yeah. So my first 2 years, you go to spring training and then you have your group of pitchers that are in extended spring. So, at any one time, you may have between 40 and 60 pitchers in extended spring training. So it was current Houston pitching coach Josh Miller, myself, and another coach named Hector Mercado. The three of us were overseeing, roughly, 20 guys each, even though we all had interactions with everybody. It was a sizable group and extended. And so, you work with a little bit of everybody, and then you get your roster, usually 17 to 20. I know it sounds like a lot, but at the time, we broke extended spring in 2014. I think we had 19 pitchers go up to the Penn League, and that was including a bunch of new drafts. So, I remember at one time we had 21 pitchers rostered in the Penn League, which would never happen today with the 165 cap. But, tough to get everybody some work, but then it does give you time for development reps and consequence-free reps away from game. And then, so as far as answering the question, yes, there was like definite responsibilities doing the extended and short season, but then full season, this is really where, okay, now we've got guys that are breaking camp out of spring training. They are prospects. We are going to do developmental work and go work to win as many games as possible in the Midwest League, in the Carolina League, and so on. So very different experience working full season compared to the short season. And I enjoyed it more, I think, just because it was more like real baseball instead of, the extended games and, rolling innings and the whole thing. That can get pretty tired pretty quick.
Did you, obviously, in this first 5 years, you're working now with this pro level. Was it a learning curve from the standpoint of like, hey, there's going to be a couple of set of guys that have their own thing that they don't really need or want my help. There's a couple of set of guys that, do need what I'm teaching them. And then there's maybe another group that like is looking to me for everything. Like I'm looking back when you were in high school, these kids probably need everything that you're teaching them. Is that part of the job when you were with Houston to like, hey, this guy might need this guy? Did you have to learn what you were trying to apply to these guys, or was it like, hard fast, hey, this is the way Houston does it, you guys will follow suit? How did that go about?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect question to explore. Number one, like there's a curriculum for developing pitchers in Houston, and it was ongoing, and we knew that we wanted to improve upon it every year. But directly answering the question, yes, there was a curriculum, there was a a way that we were going about teaching things, but it was also based on the individual. And so early on in Houston, we understood the value of maximizing the individual. It wasn't until we got fully up and running with TrackMan and high-speed cams and that stuff, 15 and 16, where we really got it going. But early on, it's like, okay, your throwing program is your throwing program, whether you are, you know, a 19-year-old kid from the island, or you're a JUCO kid that is in extended spring, or it's like, we're going to work to formulate a throwing program. And we largely based it, you know, the methodology was at its core like the Jaeger long toss program. It was the stretch phase and open up the arm, open up the body, be sustainable with your throwing every day. And if there are things that need to go into your program at the front end of your long toss, bells and whistles, if you want to call it that, that are specific to you, those are going to go into your throwing program, regardless of what your partner's got his own thing. He's managing business, right?
Right.
So that was the first place where maybe I was asked to contribute, was like, you know, formulating these throwing programs that were based off of the stretch phase, pull down phase, compression throws, but packaging in delivery work for efficiency, whether it's using the lower half or patterning the arm path. On your way back in, obviously working to, you know, be as athletic as possible and get out of the delivery for the sake of being, you know, not choreographing your movements, like being free and athletic and letting it eat.
Amen.
Training, like, I want to throw hard, I got to practice throwing hard, right?
Absolutely.
So we were introducing all these things, and I know Cleveland was on some things with that, but I just don't know where else at that time in 2014, like the program was going to be that anywhere else in pro ball. It was always like a 60, 90, 120. And, you know, I mean, huge shout out to Alan Jaeger, who crusaded for years at spring training to get pitching directors, coordinators to realize the value of long toss compared to this rehab protocol that's a 60, 90, 120. And it only took 20 years, but, you know, Alan kept on it. And, you know, give him all the credit for that. No one else was going to do that in that realm. So we were doing things at the time that were awesome, maximizing the individual. And we knew we were onto something here with the way guys were responding to that attention, that level of interaction. And the other part of your question were, you know, were there guys that, you know, maybe were stuck in their ways or didn't want the coaching, or, I think you're going to run into all those different personalities, right? And it was my first lesson, you know, my first spring training, you know, Joe Musgrove, who had been traded to the Astros from the Blue Jays in 2013. You know, I just walked up to Joe, you know, I knew of him, but I didn't really know him. And it was my first lesson in this is not the way to do it. I walked up to Joe and said something to him about his delivery or something he was doing, and he just kind of looked at me and went, "Yeah, whatever, dude." And I went, "Oh, okay. Well, that was my first introduction to nobody cares about anything I have to say until I get to know him." And so I can fast forward through all the hard lessons there, but you know, being able to, you know, whether you call it building relationships or working to get to know somebody and them get to know you, and, you know, understand what makes sense to them when you're at your best. What are you doing? Forever it was just like, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And it's like having a player have say, equity, communication back and forth. I mean, think of it. It's like, it's a no-brainer. And so, I would say that that was my first lesson in that. I ended up getting a very strong relationship with Joe. You know, he and I going out and doing early work and working on his lower half, and you know, getting him to use his body to help his arm and stay healthy. You know, he hadn't had a healthy pro season since being drafted in whatever it was, 11 or 12. So, he got over the hump, and, you know, the following year, I think he jumped 3 levels and finished up at AA that next year, and was like great to see him, you know, really buy into himself and do the things and maintain a routine, but like go do it. He could always pitch, he could always compete. Like he wasn't going to learn that from me.
Right.
Things that went into his routine that he was able to keep, that worked for him. I feel like that was a nice foundation for him that he'd never had before. And so like there's that example, and there are many more, but he's a very noteworthy one. And so yeah, it was definitely an opportunity to again individualize the programming and try to build that rapport based on we're doing this with you, not because we say this is what the Astros way is,
Yeah. I'm laughing at a story my first year in coaching where like I tried to help a pitcher with something mechanical, like as he was coming off the field, just getting like a rough inning. And like before he even got to sit down, I was like coaching him and he let me have it. And then, after the game, he's like, listen, I love you. Let's work on it now. He goes, you just got to let me cool down. I was like, of course, like but you learn as you do these things. Then obviously after Houston, you make the move to the Orioles.
Mm-hmm.
Was that move, what was the not the reason, obviously probably a promotion, but you weren't immediately the pitching coach, correct? Or you?
No, actually, yeah. So Mike Elias and Sig Maydal hired me, and it would have been, November of 2018. And as the story goes, there were other teams calling Houston for permission to request permission for me to interview for other coordinator jobs. And so, Baltimore came in knowing that there were going to be some other opportunities out there. I had crossover with them, had worked with both of them in Houston. So it was a natural fit. We all were like-minded and, basically had carte blanche to go in and get a program up and running. So being the coordinator there in 19, very, very hefty workload as far as, introducing the players, especially, the coaches who were there, and introducing both players and coaches to an entirely different platform from which to work development. And that's all the way from delivery to pitch development to, strategy to implementing communication with strength and conditioning, like the holistic approach. And I think that year and a half, because obviously I stayed the director coordinator in 2020. I mean, it was a hefty workload. I think it took years off my life, but went in and got the foundation in place, and then it's continued to develop from there. After I went to the big leagues in 21. So Baltimore, it's in a good position. It was a really awesome project to work on, and very thankful for my time there.
I would imagine, obviously, when you're doing in this, in the minors, and there may be administrators or people in baseball ops that know about you, but I wonder if there's a piece of players changing organizations and going, dude, Holt is like, oh, you could get Holt, or like, is there any of that where players are helping bring a coach to a new organization? I mean, it strikes to me, Matt Blake, who I coached in college, who was with Cleveland and then gets the job at the Yankees. Obviously, Cashman or the powers that be knew about him, but it seemed to me that maybe with Cleveland, he was with Cressy, there was Kluber, there was some guys that helped him get to Cleveland. So I guess in a roundabout way asking, do you think your reputation and work with players helped you move to Baltimore or be sought after when you were in Houston?
Yeah, I don't think so. Between Houston and Baltimore, I think that was primarily a situation where we had an alignment of beliefs with, myself and the people I'd worked with in Houston. And we knew that there was an opportunity here to, build this thing from the ground up. And so that was really the like-mindedness and cohesive approach that we had. But to answer the question, I think that coaches in general, I think, when we stick to our why, which is to, be as accurate and reliable a resource for pitchers as you possibly can be, and bring something that they won't get necessarily from everywhere else. I think that that's, if you operate under that, that gets noticed, and guys, I think will respect that. I don't know that I would ever think to have a pitcher mention my name to somebody, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the organization said, hey, you had worked with, Coach Holt, did you, I would assume they've done their research to know that,
Right.
that you're doing a good job, basically.
And I think organizations, when they're looking at potential hires, will reach out to players, and clearly it can't hurt to have those positive experiences and positive, remarks from the time spent together. But I just feel like, as far as doing this thing and doing it well, when you stay geared to really, being a kind of a servant mentality towards the work.
Right.
My high school motto was be a person for others. Maybe that's always stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I've just never, you've heard players talk about certain coaches that were, hype men or were in it for whatever reason, but it wasn't them. And,
right.
Yeah,
the guys know. They know.
Yeah, I think that it's, look, I'll be in my 5th year in the big leagues this year with Boston. And if it's my last year in the big leagues, then it's been a great run. I'm going to work my best to do right by guys this year. And, I always take it one day at a time, one game at a time, and really work to be earnest in that approach with players. That's, it's a hard game, so,
yeah, big time.
As far as really, being available for guys and a valuable part of the staff, I feel like there's a presence there that you want to maintain for the individuals, but the group is at large. And I've always worked to do that. And, if that's gets me spoken well about, then great. And if guys, look, there's been things said about me that are probably not as great too with certain guys. You're not going to
just
all the time, just nature of the beast, and you keep working to do your best with guys, All
right. Three last questions. With Baltimore, you were a time where you were the major league pitching coach, and correct me if I'm wrong, and also the director of pitching development for the whole organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. When you were doing that, were you the only person, quote unquote, that had that dual role? You're the big league pitching coach, but you're also in charge of that seems to be a job for two people.
You know what? So, and I've had this question before, and I spoke with another major league pitching coach who had the same dual title in around the same time. And he and I largely, kind of were experiencing the same thing, right? The big league job is what requires 110% of your attention. But
right.
The goal in retaining that title was that we are continuing to drive communication, programming, curriculum from the top down as well as from the bottom up. And so as the major league pitching coach and maintaining the director role, taking part in the midsummer organizational pitching meetings and bringing anything noteworthy that is from the major league side that doesn't always make its way into the minor league training narrative, being able to relay those things that all of a sudden now you're learning are extremely important compared to just the things that we've been focusing on down on the farm. So working to try to bring the best of both worlds into that pipeline was really the goal. And it kind of was born, I would say, out of Brent Strom and Craig Bjornson, who were the pitching coach and the bullpen coach in Houston. Those guys would reach out to us. When I was a minor league coach, I remember Craig Bjornson calling me early in the season, might have been early May in 2017, going, Holty, what are you guys doing as far as concealing pitch tipping and sign stealing? And, at the time, every team had a scheme. And so, we started working with our pitchers because of those phone calls on,
right.
How to make sure you're not giving away tips or tells. And then, having 3 sets of signs that you can go to and flip between at any moment, with especially a runner on second. And sign stealing from second was rampant at the time. So like these are things where, we just wanted to continue to follow that model as far as, that outreach making its way into the mindset and the narrative with the minor league pitchers, in addition to the curriculum things that were concrete for development. And so I would say that, yes, like having those two titles may seem like a lot, but the big league job in and of itself was like, the primary focus, as you might imagine, but then also having outreach on, certain prospects with the having a little more hands-on with some of those other players that were, getting there, making their way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it would sound like I know a decent amount of pro pitching coaches. I mean, obviously whether they have that title or not, they're still informed of what's going on with pitchers throughout the system. That's just, the nature of that position. To Boston now, it's kind of interesting. I coached at Sacred Heart from 2006 to 2022. And for about 3 years, two dudes would come in January and February and ask for some space in the field house to get their long toss in. And that was Craig Breslow and Andrew Bailey. And now Craig Breslow is the GM in Boston, and Andrew Bailey's the pitching coach. Just great human beings, tremendous baseball guy. I know Pete Fatsy who's the hitting guy. You're on board now. I mean, it's a top-notch coaching staff. From your perspective as the bullpen coach, being a new organization, being a new quote-unquote title, what do you see as your role as bullpen coach? Do you bringing the standard bullpen coach, or because of your background, are you working in a different way as the bullpen coach this year?
Yeah, I think to be as direct as I can with it, I don't see myself as just a bullpen coach, alone. It's like I have the experiences that I've had, and clearly it's an important role to be able to be in the bullpen, but also to have perhaps a bit more experience and background in coming into that role than perhaps other bullpen coaches could offer. That said, it's it's really encouraging to, be working with a group, led by Bailey, and, Brez obviously has got quite a bit of pitching background. His work in Chicago was well documented. And so like as a group, where I kind of fit in with this group is like, I come from a Houston, I come from a Baltimore, where we were doing things in a way that was very effective in a very timely manner. And, working to bring all the best from those past experiences and marry that with everything that they're already doing well here, which is, I mean, it's been it's just been incredible. Like, honestly, like the curriculum and the way things are organized and being part of this group. Justin Willard, who's the director, extremely well organized, has very solid educational resources for coaching staff and for continuing ed. Never quite seen anything like it. And so joining this and continuing to stay growth mindseted, knowing that I've got experience, but I don't have all the answers, and
right.
I want to become as tooled up as I can. And being here has not only forced me to, but like it's made it fun to tool up. So it's from a different perspective and a different group, that we come from different places, but we're all bringing the best of what we bring. And I think the players are recognizing it. And we're really excited about this group of pitchers that we have, both for the rotation and depth in the pen.
You said something that one of my last podcasts with Jerry Weinstein, who's 81 years old, and would say like, man, I'm still learning. And then the guy knows more baseball, or has forgotten more baseball than I know. But to your point, like it must be pretty cool to be within an organization, take your experience. But like you said, this guy's has this continuing. It's really cool to see how it's run like that. All right. Last question. I didn't prep you on it at all. But for a developing pitcher, high school, college, a young pitching coach, at this stage, any one or two things that you're like, man, if I could do it again, or these are some things, and you've said it throughout, that I could definitely infer, but is that just as I ask it to you that way, is there anything that pops into your head that you wish your own child or a young pitcher or coach would learn earlier rather than later?
Yeah, I referenced it at the very outset of the call. I made my varsity high school team as a freshman, and I think I was 84, 85 mile an hour guy as a 16-year-old in high school. And then I became, through no fault of any coach or anything, I just became kind of enamored with mechanics. Mm. So I was trying to copy anybody from Roger Clemens to Nolan Ryan to Jimmy Key, who was a lefty. I remember trying this and trying that. I mean, maybe that was an early indication that I was going to be a pitching dork and be on a track to coach. But I think that, to that point, it's like I mechanics to myself out of intent. The intent was always to throw the bejesus out of it, pop the mitt. And my first delivery as a little leaguer was like, Roger Clemens is my guy. So like my delivery was very much the rhythm and tempo that I envisioned, like I'm Roger Clemens throwing. It didn't look like that necessarily, but that's the way that, I learned. And so when I started doing other things and getting away from the pure intent to fire the ball and pop the mitt, it became very muddy. And I don't think I got back to 85 plus until, after I'd gone and worked with the, Coach McLeod down at Tallahassee. I mean, I might not have scratched 82, 83 my entire senior year in high school, so the number one thing, and I think the training available now probably prevents quite a bit of that from happening. It's gotten fairly systematic with how to train for velocity. But I would first make sure to impart that it's very important as a high school pitcher to continue to view your position as a high level throwing position. And you can throw without pitching, but you cannot pitch without throwing. And I think when we start to kind of get into this mindset of like pretty little pitches to pretty little locations and pushing as opposed to like letting it rip and popping the mitt, then you're going down a path that's going to take you in the other direction. And I have a little league clinic that I'm working with right now. And I said, guys, we get like 11, 12-year-olds. It's like, how many times have you guys heard in your games, like, hey, just throw strikes? It's kind of punchline, right? But they're like all the time. Like, we're like, well, every time you hear just throw strikes, I want you to say to yourself, pop the mitt. Mm-hmm. The mitt is in the strike zone, but like, we got to keep the intent to attack and pop the mitt. I think it's like, maybe it's just like super old school and minimalist to a fault, but this overemphasis on being really good with mechanics and being really good with like strike throwing all the time. It's like, it doesn't work that way for the guys that end up making it and becoming something. Very few were like seasoned strike throwers at their age, So I would say that maintaining intent and, Paul Nyman was the first guy to really start to focus on the word intent, and intent over the years has come to mean effort, but intent in its purest form is purpose.
Right.
Keep that purpose to throw as hard as I can, as straight as I can, for as long as I can. At the very heart of like the training element, I've got something to work with there as a kid and as an aspiring pitcher going into the high school ranks.
Yeah, I love what you just said. It's fantastic. I do this goofy thing when I was coaching college, or I'm working with kids now, and I'll say like, hey, what are you thinking about on the mound? And like in a game or whatever. He goes, I'm thinking about, my delivery and arm slot, and I got to get the ball here. And then I would stand at the plate and say, all right, think of a team you don't like and a guy on the other team you don't like. And now I'm the hitter, you throw me a pitch, and I would like make like I'm the hitter, hit a home run, bat flip, give the guy the finger, run around the bases, and make fun of the kid. And then I come back up and then say, all right, here's my next step at. What are you thinking about now? And the kid goes, thinking about shoving it up your blank. I go, yeah, there we go. That's a good mind, right? This sport's a one-on-one battle 60 feet, 6 inches away.
Yep.
So many kids, even though they, like you said, do know how to train to throw harder, a lot of times when they're pitching, they're just thinking about me. What am I doing? No, just kick the other guy's ass, man. That's a big part of it, Something
to be said for that too. And I mentioned Mike DeAndrea's name earlier. I had him for one summer ball season, my final season in Legion, and had made good strides with my pitching coach Kevin Smith on my delivery, and but playing for Mike DeAndrea, I mean, it was at the heart of everything that we were doing. Was on one pitch, I'm beating you, whether I'm pitching or I'm fielding at shortstop or I'm in the box trying to get a hit off you. It was like that mindset to just beat that guy in front of you. I never really had that be like the constant dominant thought, but it was, again, without that guy, without having the ability to kind of develop that mindset, I probably don't get a chance to pitch in college and or stay, because like you can tell when you start to downshift from that. It's like,
totally.
And maybe it takes somebody taking you deep or something happening to then get it. Should, like, you should go out there with the chip on the shoulder, ready to dominate from pitch one, if you're one of those guys. And so, again, being able to maintain the dominant mindset in everything that you're doing is, I think it brings out the most in your physical capabilities too. Because going back to that Bernstein principle, the body will arrange itself to meet the ultimate goal. That is like the oldest, simplest thing that I first heard at a pitching coach's boot camp 20 years ago. And it still plays today, because it's like, it speaks 100% to intent. And now you start adding in pitch development, seam shift, all these new nuts and bolts and bells and whistles that can change intent. And you still need to maintain the ultimate goal, which is to throw nasty, hard, late life stuff through the box and beat somebody. If your intent, or, reverse engineering that, if your intent becomes too technical, we lose what's going on down at home plate,
Yes.
And there was, it's like there's mind over the rubber, mind over the dish.
Totally.
If I had to put it anywhere, I'd put it over the dish 90-10. You got to have some awareness on the 10, but 100%. Like I watched Pedro pitch growing up, Nolan Ryan, Roger Clemens, like that was late life. That was through the zone. They were coming after you and staying after you and putting you away. And if they got beat, they got beat doing it their way. They weren't going to nibble. They weren't going to be cute. It was like, they're coming after you. So I think everybody has that capability. It's really, do they have the mindset to think like that consistently? And then if they happen to get knocked out of their, their flow state, zone state in a game, do they have the ability to get back into it on command? So, I'll leave it with that, but we could probably go for an hour on just that topic, Wayne.
No, it is. I mean, I'm doing a little mental for my clients that I work with recruiting. I'm doing a whole mental thing tonight, because these kids know how to lift and strength and conditioning, and know how to throw bullpens and plyos and to hit off machines. But when the season comes, that mindset becomes really ultimately important. And I was thinking of a couple, you mentioned those pitchers. Yeah, they gave up a shot. Just give me the ball back. I'm coming after the next guy. But I always think of like, Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, who just, their intent, their mindset was just so competitive constantly. You don't always win, but their minds were always in the right place. But
yeah, it's like Larry Bird talking about a shooting technique. It's like the technique was going to be there because he took all those reps. But in the moment, the technique was solid under the lights, under stress, duress, because the goal was to beat somebody. I firmly believe
amen
that.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, thanks so much for your time again in the off season, and I'm so happy to connect with you, and looking forward to keeping track of the Red Sox in your career, and maybe at some point the beard will be back. Who knows? I will shave, like I said, when it gets to, this is like my winter face jacket, so when it gets to like 75, I take this gray off, but for now, I mean, I was out walking today. Same for you. It's in the single digits outside today, but
I'm not saying it'll ever come back, but for right now, I'm pretty happy with the way things have been going, Wayne. So we'll see. Now, my wife doesn't like it either. So if she wants me to stay shaven, she wins.
oh yeah. So my wife asks me all the time, when are you getting rid of that? But she knows it eventually comes off, so she could put up with it for a little while.
Bingo.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much. Pleasure, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for.
All right. You got it. Take care.
You too.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of And That's the Game podcast presented by Pro Batter Sports. Hope you enjoyed our conversation with Boston Red Sox bullpen coach Chris Holt. I'd like to remind you that this podcast is made possible through the great support of Pro Batter Sports, maker of the most advanced pitching machines for baseball, softball, and cricket. Like a pilot training in a flight simulator, hitters can practice like they play, getting the equivalent of live at-bats against a batting practice pitcher who never gets tired and can throw any pitch with pinpoint accuracy. Check out their line of amazingly affordable systems at probatter.com and take your swing to the next level. In addition, don't miss the new book, Practice Like You Play, authored by Adam Battersby, the president of Pro Batter Sports, with a chapter on recruiting written by yours truly. This is available today on Amazon.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope to see you on our next episode.
For more information about Pro Batter Sports, visit them on the web at probatter.com.